It's that time again for the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am your host, Dean Phillips. I have a tremendous guest with me today. I have with me Matthew Welle. Of course, he is the president of CST Precision. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Dean. Pleasure to be with you.
It's great to have you back again. I haven't talked to Matt in quite some time. Matt and I, full disclosure, we have served on different various SME committees, including the member council. So it's we've known each other probably a decade plus, maybe 12 years.
Yeah, that's a good ballpark. In and out of contact for a while, but always good chatting and catching up.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Tell me right off the bat, what is the big significant change that you see coming?
I think just from my perspective, I see further acceleration in automation, and I'd say just the big need to address the talent vacuum that's going to get worse than it already is. So I think there's technologies already in place, but I see it just accelerating even farther to address the amount of skills, talent, and knowledge that is already leaving the workforce and going to continue over the next 5 years, 20 years for that matter, is going to drive further technology into the automation, simplifying processes to produce various products, and then also just the way we go about training and hiring and recruiting people, challenging our beliefs that somebody needs to know everything coming into your environment. And I think it's already happening now where people are challenging their environment so anybody coming in can be successful versus they have to come in prepared with a certain XYZ background to be successful. I think that that's kind of a vague answer. I get that, but that's what I see, I guess.
Yeah. I will say this, that I think that it's interesting that we're kind of experiencing what a lot of the Japanese manufacturers had looked at years ago, which is if you focus on your process. If your process is good, then it shouldn't matter who I put behind the wheel of the vehicle. They should be able to drive it.
Yeah, and I think it's that's absolutely a good point. I think it actually goes across. From a manufacturing perspective, we're oftentimes focused on those doing the actual hands-on value-add work to raw materials or nowadays additive. But I think it goes to the streamlining the processes of quoting jobs, for that matter, putting together quotes for products, putting together quotes for parts, so ordering materials all the way through production and then on to delivery. But every aspect of that just changes so much. Like, for example, I bought the business coming up on 4 years ago now, and the systems and structure that were in place were a bit archaic. And the person, one of the employees that came with the business, stayed on but retired about 9 months later. And her primary focus was building structure and systems so the person that was going to replace her would be able to do a great deal more than what she did for a good 20 years in her position. And now the person that basically replaced that employee when she retired spends about 20% of her time doing what that person spent full time, satisfying the function of that job. So it's an expanded role. It offers the person in that role more skills, more abilities, more valuable to the organization, and it reflects in compensation opportunities for people as well. But the single, I guess, minimal job description of what was 25 years ago is just so much broader and so expanded based on the applications of technology, and that goes to the production of product, but also, like I said, all the back office functions too.
Right. And that is really very important. I see a lot of companies overlook the importance of back office functionality and integration with other systems. Do you see that becoming more automated and more, I guess, taking a higher precedence than we have in the past?
I think it's any organization really striving to, I'd say, grow. I mean, if you want, like, I work with some companies that are very comfortable with who they are and how they do things, and they have specialized skills and abilities that, and they provide a perfect service niche to their customers, and they'll be fine as long as they want to be. But there's a difference, and it depends on the goal of what you're trying to do with your business. So, for example, CST, we've got an awesome foundation now. We're a couple weeks away from our ISO 13485 and 9001 Stage 2 audit. But with those certifications, that's part of a foundation to pursue a different customer base to grow our business and eventually get it 10, 15 years down the road that we're extremely attractive to somebody wanting to acquire us potentially with private equity or whatever it might be.
Right.
So that's the goal for what we want to do with the business. For us to do that, we're going to need to become efficient from A to Z on every single business function. Whereas if we wanted to be the same company providing the exact same customers with the exact same services that we bought or that we did when we bought the company, then we wouldn't necessarily have to embrace all those new technologies and implement that new structure and systems for efficiency. But if we don't embrace that, it also brings in a lot more challenges as well, as far as trying to hire, recruit, retain, and train a workforce to satisfy those customers as well. Because the workforce today, I think, wants to be part of a company going somewhere, doing something, and being part of something bigger. So you can embrace the change and incorporate the technology, and I think that's a great path to go on. It's what we've chosen to do, or you can choose otherwise. But choosing not to embrace it, I think, brings in and invites a whole different group of problems as well. So it's not like the change is going to be, you're either choosing to change by choice and get better, or you're choosing not to, and then you're going to get to deal with a different collection of problems that not changing is going to give you, you know?
Oh, yeah. I think it's a lot like doing preventive maintenance versus predictive maintenance.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you want to control it or let it control you? Because that's what's going to happen. Tell me, that is great. First of all, compliments to you for ISO. That is a lot of work, and I congratulate you on that. Tell me, when you guys made that decision, what was it like the first day when you make that decision to do that? When everybody goes, oh man, this is going to be a lot of work. How do you keep that positivity from when you make that decision to when you realize how much work it's going to be to put it in and how much time?
Well, your question's kind of, I don't have the answer you're probably looking for, because it wasn't a decision out of day one, or we announced to everybody today, this is what we're doing. We actually put our business plan in place and had a plan on what we were looking for a company to buy, and a plan on what we were going to do with that company before we ever bought it. And so our 5-year plan has obtaining ISO certifications. And so when we purchased the company, our main goal out of the gate was to service the existing customers, keep them happy, grow with them as we could, while working towards the foundation for future growth. And about year 2.5, year 3, we wanted to have certifications in place. COVID created some uncertainties and delayed it just a little bit, but we are on track and putting them in place. So everybody, the employees and everybody, knew we were working to position our business and we're headed down this path. So it was honestly more of a vision and ideas that were discussed with every employee that's been part of the journey and has come on board at different points of the journey that knew about it, and not necessarily knowing everything involved with it, but knowing that that's the direction we're going with the company. And I want anybody that's going to work here to actually know where we're going, what direction we're going, and make a conscious choice to be part of it. Not I'm driving the boat this way and I'm grabbing you by the collar to bring you along, but actually be a choice to go along. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I think that, I think that is the best way. Is you have to build a vision, and you have to have other people buy into that vision and have to believe in it, because at the end of the day, that is how you're going to meet with the best results from getting support. And more importantly, they have to execute their parts of the phase that to do an ISO, to get to ISO certification. You have to have all of those other nuts and bolts in place, because they're not looking at just, oh, do you do this right? They're looking at, do you do everything right? They want to make sure that you have everybody in place doing those things. They have to be able to execute.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You think of something else that, like, as far as sharing that vision and where we're going and what we're trying to do, has become very empowering for some of my employees, because I'm still very involved in sales and customer relationships, and I want to say yes to everything. And on occasion, something comes across our desk that we probably shouldn't necessarily be entertaining with who we are today and where we're going. And my employees, and knowing where we're going and what we're doing, and me having communicated with them what we want to do, have at times been empowered to challenge me on, is this really us? Is this what we want to be taking on for work? And it's like, it's kind of humbling for me. It's encouraging because they're listening to what I'm saying and going that path, but then being empowered to challenge me with, this might not fit with where we're going, and it puts me in check too. So that's definitely been an added benefit. Putting it all out there, I guess.
Well, and I think that's good. In many cases, that makes for a good relationship for when you're the president of the company, to understand that everybody should have an opportunity to speak their mind and be able to interject. And if they don't feel that, and they don't see that you may try to bite off more than you can chew, that they might never take those challenges. They may never try to stretch beyond what they're currently doing, and understand that, hey, we have a system in place to make sure that we are staying true to our course.
Yeah. And like, I know this is primarily about technology, but that is something that we work very hard on culture here. So as far as our hiring practices, who we bring into the company, and the interview process, but then also we define what we want success to look like 3 months into the job, 6 months into the job, a year into the job, and where we see it going. And we have not just an annual review, but we have a 3-month check-in, a 6-month check-in, then an annual review, and then another 6-month check-in with, here's what we anticipate your path to be, aligned with compensation. But that's just part of it. It's also the dialogue, like having employees challenge me on whether or not something's aligned with our vision is super encouraging to me. But we take that and point it out to everybody that I was challenged on something, that I welcomed it, that I said no to it because of the challenge internally, and I encourage everybody to do the same. And I thank them adamantly for challenging me on it, because they're part of making the vision a reality. And so I think from creating a world-class organization, I think that's an incredibly vital part of building that company like that. I mean, we can focus on technology all day, and we can focus on having the best machines and the best robots and the best automation. But if I don't have the team in place that's aligned with that vision to know what we're going to use those tools for, I don't think I'm going to get the return on my investment that I could. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
everybody has to see that it's the value of certain things, and they have to believe in the same things that you do. You know, there's millions of companies out there, and everyone's competing for employees. But I think the right approach is the culture that you have will dictate what employees you'll have. There are employees out there that fit in doing, enjoy doing roofing and siding. You know, I did that my first 2 years. after I worked a couple other jobs, I had worked in it because it paid better. So I was working in that general field because I was in construction and I did electrical work and other things. But what I will say is that there comes a point where you say, is this what I see for my long term? I mean, does this align with what I went to college for? And it wasn't. I went to college for electrical engineering. And you get to the point and you say, yeah, I know this pays better right now, but maybe I just have to suck it up and go spend some time working as an apprentice and then building into that career. And that's what I did. And I changed course doing that. And I think there are people in different stages of their careers that may want different types of jobs, but they know, I think today, workers today, people that are coming out of college or even out of high school, they have a better idea of what it is that's going to make them happy. Do you have I know you're doing more with additive and other technologies. Which ones do you see giving you the biggest bang for your buck? I would imagine too with IoT, if you're doing ISO certification, that adds a lot of value to you to do IoT things where you're automatically tracking your work instead of
So yeah, we, as I mentioned before, we've changed a lot of the systems and structure for just order management, but we're not done with that. We're actually looking at a software we're likely going to implement shortly after ISO certification that is basically going to do away with pretty much all paperwork. It'll all be electronic and also sets up automatic triggers from one step to the next. So that part, and that's just something, in my opinion, you review quite regularly. It's actually part of the ISO requirements, is evaluating and considering your IT systems and structures. But that's part of it. But I do think additive manufacturing, the 3D printing, the technology is so rapidly changing. And even from a price point for a very good quality printer, you can buy a hobby printer for, in my opinion, inexpensive off of Amazon. That's going to be awesome for a hobbyist. Mm-hmm. But even getting to the entry market for plastic specifically to something more substantial, something more robust, something of higher quality, the barrier to market for additive is drastically less than it once was, but the simplicity of it too. So we made the decision to buy a 3D printer little over a year ago, coming up on a year and a half or so. But we did it initially because I guess at the time it was the largest volume of jobs of production time that we had allocated to machines was for a family of parts for these assemblies that we were doing. And they were made out of aluminum and steel and different components that we were machining. And we got really good at it with dedicated fixtures and processes. But I honestly challenged, it was an inherited design from the previous owner, but I challenged it basically on whether or not it was necessary to be metal product for that matter. And so we took solid models, sent them to the people that sell the printers, and they printed some samples for us. And we put the assemblies together and put them into the unit and discussed it with our customer, and they ran it through some test cycles, and they were fine approving that change from metal parts to plastic printed parts. And so we went ahead and bought the printer because we already had the purchase order in place. It was going to cover the cost of it. And it was a risk I was certainly willing to take based on the price point. But that printer in the first year of ownership has cut out a lot of labor. It's very robust. It produces very repeatable parts that now have reduced our costs, and we're able to pass some of that cost savings on to the customer as well. But the simplicity of it too, and the skills needed to print those parts and have them assembly ready versus the amount of tooling I need, the raw material. It's as simple as basically if we have the design in a 3D CAD system, we can send a STL file to the printer and just let it print. Mm-hmm. versus the programming, the tooling selection, the setting up of jigs and fixtures and vices onto machines. It's just, when you really stop and analyze and think about the difference in work that went into making the parts before to what goes into it now, we just are baffled sometimes of the gain it's produced for us. And I personally think we're at the very early stages of realizing the benefits of that technology. It seems like it's being adopted and used all over the place, but it's there are so many more gains that I anticipate that I'm not even aware of. I just think for us to have this one example, I'm highly confident in my head there's examples all over the place that once the right person's challenging the process, that it's just going to change the technology used to produce those things.
Right. Do you think that, speaking of the technology aspect of that, do you feel that by having that technology that can run somewhat lights out, do you feel that that's something that you're driving towards, whereas equipment that can run without supervision is a direction that you guys are looking?
Oh, absolutely. So like the printer we have, for example, it's a powder-based printer, and it has a build chamber that'll, if it's packed full, it'll take about 50 hours to produce the entire build chamber. And I can start that thing on Friday afternoon, go home and come in Monday morning, and the build chamber's done with. I can have, depending on the collection of parts, there could be 300 different parts in there, depending on the size and how the build chamber is configured. But that's just one example. But also like Swiss screw machines, integrating robots, basically. So, I mean, you can have a simple 3-axis mill, then you can incorporate a robot into doing pretty much everything that a human being does to load and unload those parts. And you can have a vision system that says the part's still good and should continue to run, or it goes to the vision system and says it's bad, and it'll stop and wait for somebody to come and troubleshoot and fix the problem. But absolutely anticipate going down that path to robot-tended machines, but also like Swiss machines, which are Swiss screw machines that are pretty much autonomous anyways. I previously actually ran businesses with Swiss departments in which the parts or the machines would just continue producing parts all weekend, and we would actually have fewer quality problems and issues during the unattended run times than we did during human beings operation and doing more inspections, because we had more false negatives than actual negatives. Right. In which people were trying to fix problems that didn't exist. So, yeah, I do see us embracing that reality and taking advantage of those technologies that reduce the number of mistakes and errors that are inevitable with human beings.
Well, you know, it's interesting because a lot of people argue against additive because they say, well, it's not a very fast process. It isn't great for production runs. But my argument usually against that is you're fighting a downward trend in workforce. You have less and less people. And this technology, if you can run it lights out or near lights out, then the trade-off is that the time that you're gaining as opposed to somebody being there is incredible. And, you know, how many shops are running only one shift, not because they don't have work to run more than one shift, but because they don't have a workforce to fill more than one shift. Do you see that?
Certainly. But like, I think what you presented, depending on context, you're both right?
Sure. No, I agree. There's certain parts you're right. You're absolutely right.
But if you're taking a stance, if anybody, I think, is taking a stance that 3D printing is bad, then okay, well, leave it open to the context that it's absolutely the right decision. So, like, I think our example is an awesome one for that. So, for example, we do like 24 complete units of these parts, and we can put them all into one build chamber, print them all, come in Monday, and we're ready to do 24 complete assemblies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas previously, and having transitioned from machine components to this, previously we ended up buying 8 different sizes of material from multiple suppliers and setting up each individual machine to run. We would run in batches of 100 and carry that inventory for longer periods of time, but it would be batches of 100. And now our batches are down to just the 24 that we're going to do this week or next week, whatever it's going to be. And then we'll just run another print next week for another 24, whatever it's going to be. It gives us much more options as far as, well, one, how much we have invested in raw materials and labor into parts sitting on a shelf or not. It's our choice, obviously. But we have been able to reduce that cost, the carrying cost of the work and inventory or work and materials that go into parts that don't sell immediately. Right. And then, but the other side of that, I mean, there's still absolutely things that, like the efficiency of a Swiss screw machine. There's a ridiculous number of electrical connectors that, even as efficient as metal printing might get someday, that process is matured and refined and robust enough that I'd be very amazed if at some point it was ever overtake the volume production and the robustness of a Swiss screw machine, and even quite a few other machining operations and components. But to take a position that it's bad, that's just well. Okay, I'm not having that argument. I guess my position, if it's not worth my time.
No, you're
free to believe what. Good luck to you.
And that's true. And I think, I've talked to people like Terry Wohlers and other people that are very involved in advance, and most people in additive would agree that, look, you're not replacing an existing process with additive just for the sake of additive. You're doing it because you can do 5 of these parts in one part through an additive process versus a fabrication and assembly. Or you're doing it because of the materials that you're available to use or the flexibility it gives you. You're absolutely right. You are not trying to make an argument to replace the Swiss screw machines with additive process. That it doesn't make sense, because it has been validated that, that machining process in its value,
right.
It's hard to beat that out of what that machine does, the way it does it, unless you're trying to explore something in some very complex materials. That's one area that to me has been, it's been tapped and it's going in that direction. But I'm surprised it hasn't gone faster into exploring some of these complex materials through advancing chemistries to use different materials, whether it's, metal additive printing or whether it's doing more things with a combination of plastics and wood or many of the other materials.
Where I'm actually amazed at how far it has gone down the road of different materials, including copper, tool steel, Inconels, Hastelloys, just some of the exotic materials that I was just surprised they went down that road. But when you think about it, if you can actually do it with any steel for that matter, transitioning to Inconel or Hastelloy is probably easier than, like, if you're cutting brass and aluminum and now you're going to try cutting Hastelloy or Inconel on a CNC machine. I'm thinking the transition's probably easier in a 3D printing process than it is from a CNC machining standpoint, because the difference in the cutting tools, speeds and feeds, and all the stuff like that, versus the 3D printing side of it, it's probably an easier transition for an operator level. And obviously creating the systems to be able to produce those is one thing, but I do think it's much more applicable to the exotic materials versus trying to make it for mass production, but it still has its place for the right parts. So
right, I think you brought up a great point there with Inconel, because of when you start getting into some of these exotic materials, the cost of the raw materials, and you can say all you want about, well, we capture so much of that material after. Well, how much did raw Inconel cost you to how much you're getting back on scrap Inconel?
Right.
You're not getting a 1-to-1 ratio if you just sit there cutting chip all day. It's
right.
It's
not quite like a precious metal where you can get a nice return on gold or silver if that's what you're machining. But if you're on, Inconel and Hastelloy, it's not quite not in that category yet.
No, but it is expensive if you scrap stuff. Which is where I think additive really shines, is making materials that you're not, since it's an additive process, you don't have a lot of waste. And that really is attractive in those exotic metals.
Yeah, and even from just a wear on a machine and a tooling cost, it's a drastic gain, because, you could print something that's not necessarily a finished part just because of the tolerances you might need to hold, but the amount of material you have to remove is so drastically less that, the gains are certainly there.
Right. I loved one of your points there that you made about accessibility, and I always preach that to some of the schools when I've gone and spoken there, is that it's technology today is so much different than it was, in the 80s. Yes, there were a lot of advancements in computers and things like that, but the one thing that today has, think about how much drone technology, the actual technology goes into even these cheapest units. There's millions of dollars of technology that, how you run a drone. You think about AI, you think about robotics, you think about all these machines that today you have so much more technology incorporated even into the cheapest ones, but the accessibility point is so much more affordable. You can get a drone for a couple $100. You can get these robots. You can get them by the hour. You can rent them like it's almost like you're hiring an employee. You're renting it by the hour, and it's an incredible time, I think, for technology and accessibility of those VR and AR. The technologies are so much more readily available in Unreal and Unity, and there's so much more to come, I think, because people are able to access them at a younger age, and even in the schools to be able to gain access to some of this. What are you working with any schools, like technology-wise? I know when I used to work for Piranha, we used to do all of our R&D, and they would do all of our testing and proving at K-State at that time. Are you doing anything like that?
We've done a little bit of work with a co-op program with a local high school for some students, but we're not quite as integrated into the universities and stuff as we want to be. I have had meetings with a representative of the University of South Carolina, and I anticipate talking with Clemson. But my previous job, there was a lot of university, and this was up in New England, like at MIT and Northeastern, some of the engineering schools up there, where they had a lot of incubator businesses and on campus or very close to campus, utilizing the engineering and departments in biomed and whatnot. And they would basically create the companies right on campus for different medical device products that were in development. And so once we have the certifications in place and can offer that, those services with the 13485 in the med device field, then we anticipate pursuing that. But to this point, it's not been part of our strategy.
Yeah. Well, I think, the younger we can start getting some of these kids in, and I'm glad that you're doing it with a co-op with some of the high schools, because I think those employees have some of the greatest potential for us, because they're somebody who already now is familiar with the culture, has experience with the company, and if they have a positive experience, they're likely to be somebody that will stay or come back after they graduate.
Yeah.
And what's the other technologies you see coming up that you're really excited about?
Let's see, that we haven't covered already. I do think VR, as you mentioned, is going to change things drastically. Like, I mean, I would take what YouTube already is from what a person can learn and advance and grow and build skills. So we work to create and foster an environment where we encourage risk taking, obviously calculated risk taking. But if you've got an idea on how we can make this faster, more efficient, exploit this machine and the technologies and what it can do to make us better, we want to talk about it. And when time permits, we're going to figure out how to experiment on things. And I've got an awesome team in place, and we have that culture in which we do challenge things. But some of the employees jump on YouTube and basically self-study, because there's no way I know from the day they started to where they are now, coming out of tech school, they had the base knowledge of machining and some CNC programming, and they have gotten so proficient at things and challenging how we do things, how we hold things, feeds, speeds, tooling designs, everything that they're able to challenge just with the knowledge that YouTube has to offer. I mean, the machine suppliers of Haas, Mazak, almost all of them out there are putting out plenty of content to learn how to use their machines more efficiently than you would get out of a tech school.
Yeah, because it's more applicable.
Yeah, and I would not even come close to trying to diminish the value of a college education, a high school or a tech school education. It's incredibly valuable. But my personal perception is, whether you choose that route or not, anybody with the ambition and motivation to learn the skills to grow and get ahead in, my personal opinion, is almost any manufacturing field, unless it's extremely new and the content's not available. I think virtual reality and the systems that are already in place and the knowledge that is basically out there and free, it's there for you. And if you take the ambition and initiative to just start doing it, you're going to end up increasing the value that you offer your employer. You're likely going to advance faster, or you're going to get to the point that you recognize you've outgrown your employer and you can go somewhere else and either start your own company or get a new job, for that matter, that's going to pay you for what you're worth with that knowledge. But thinking that you're going to obtain a certain level of education in a tech school or 4-year college, or you can get a doctorate's degree, but you come out, and every manufacturing sector is so specialized that regardless, in my opinion, you have to go in and figure out how to solve problems and make the environment better than it was when you got there.
Right.
And if you can do that from a machining standpoint, from a fabrication standpoint, from a welding standpoint, I personally think you could do it in any environment. And that's what I'm looking for with employees, is somebody who has that, gives me the inclination that they have that type of attitude and aptitude to whatever problems come towards us tomorrow, we're going to roll up our sleeves, get to work and solve them, because if we're good at this, they're not going to be the same problems that were here yesterday. So we are going to have to face new problems.
I agree. And initiative counts for an awful lot.
Yep.
Matt, we're just about out of time here. I really appreciate you taking the time with me, but tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and connect with you.
Sure. Our website is CSTPrecision.com, and there's information on there. You can contact us. Our phone number is 864-879-8165. I've got an email address, mwelle@CSTPrecision.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think we have a Twitter page. I don't manage all of our media channels, I guess, but CST Precision. You can Google it. And today we're very high mix, low volume, custom machine shop, and we are progressing more specialized into that med device and regulated manufacturing space. So
great. Fantastic, sir. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Dean. Love the chat.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day.